right, aloha, friends. Brian Gossett here, GM Sports Media. Another episode of Game Time with the Goss, powered by Grey Wolf Promotions. Volleyball playoffs just around the corner. Football playoffs coming up. You're looking for some playoff T-shirts? Go check them out. GreyWolfPromotions.com. My guest today, my good buddy, the volleyball insider and big media's Chuck Licata. Chuck, welcome back to the show.
Oh my goodness. Did we do one, I think, in August, and that's been it? It's been a while, my friend.
It's been a minute.
Yeah.
Volleyball playoffs officially start on Monday by district round, November 4th. We're excited. Uh, if you're not all caught up with the rule changes this year, I'll give you a refresher. Instead of 6 champs this year, we go to 11, two each in the top 5 largest classifications. And we have a D1, D2 bracket based on enrollment sizes. If you go to the volleyball page on gmsportsmedia.com, I have updated district standings, and you can tell which schools are going D1 and D2. Later on, we'll have playoff pairings and also final stat leaders from the regular season. So please go check
Sweet.
sportsmedia.com. So yeah, Chuck, just want to get your thoughts with this new rule, divisional split. What's your take on it this year, and is this something that's going to be good for the UIL for years to come?
Well, this time next year, everybody will have gone through it one time, right? So everybody will kind of get a feel. They'll know the feel and pattern. This year, with it being the first go around on this, I'm sure you've gotten the questions that Butch Hart and I have gotten, as well as what's this mean? What's this gonna, how's this gonna impact and how's this gonna be different? Um, Obviously, the biggest, as you had just mentioned a minute ago, we're gonna have 11 state champions. The only one that isn't gonna have a double state champ is 1A, because they stayed regular, no D1, D2. And what it's done too is today is Friday. Okay. So what you're looking at is usually at this time, you've got that weekend where there's big matchups, figuring out determining playoff positioning stuff. We didn't have that because we didn't need it, because you've got D1, D2, two teams go D1, two teams go D2. There's no need for playoff seeding. All I have to do is be in the top 4 somewhere. Now there are a couple, don't get me wrong, but it's nowhere near what we're used to in the past. The other thing for me, the biggest thing that D1, D2 does for me, you look at the state tournament schedule, and I know you have, and Maddie has as well. It's basically a weekend. There's one match on Thursday, there's a couple on Friday, and then championship Saturday at Garland. Okay. State semifinals are being played Monday and Tuesday. That means now, for the first time in God knows how long in volleyball, when you say, I went to state, when you say go to state, that means state semifinals and state finals, usually in the same place. For the first time in forever, that's not the case, because the state semifinals are going to be played somewhere else. They're not going to be at the Caldwell Center in Garland. So you're still going to have that. Yes, our team went to state that year, but it's not going to be the same anymore. The atmosphere isn't going to be the same because the state semifinals are being held elsewhere. And Brian, I guess there's an advantage to that because a lot of people will get a chance to go to a state semifinal matchup because it'll be kind of regional and it'll be somewhere where people can drive, especially people down south. It's just, but to me, having gone to state every year since 2011 and having gone to most of the state tournaments before, it's just not going to be the same.
Yeah, it's going to take a football approach. We're down from 7 games to 6. As you mentioned, no real state tournament, no Final Four. Also, no regional tournaments, which is something I'm going to miss.
Right.
Of course, with the regional tournaments, however, we could have sort of a regional tournament if those 4 schools at that point want to agree on a neutral site.
Right.
But yeah, I'm with you. I love to see those. I mean, for me and for you as well, probably it's hard to choose a game to go to. So it's nice to
Oh,
have
yeah.
it's nice to have 2 games in one spot. So now I'm gonna have to pull my hair trying to pick which game to go to. But as you mentioned, yes, the state semifinals are neutral site. Um, it takes the approach of when we in COVID year, we didn't have a true
Right.
tournament. Um, but yeah, I think the advantage here, a minor advantage is you talk about the playoff seeding, and yes, usually if you had co-district champs, they would have to play a third game to determine that first seed. Now,
Hmm.
now there's some like that, but at the same time, if one is D1 and one is D2 and they're co-champs, you don't have to play that third game. So
Hmm.
you don't have to risk injury or fatigue having playing a game so close to the playoffs. That's an advantage. I mean, with the state semifinals, you could say there's rest now. You have a couple of days of rest.
Right.
So those 5A, 6A schools having to play, in the afternoon on a Friday or Friday night and have to turn around and play the final on Saturday. There's that, but yeah, it's going to take some time to adjust. But I mean, I'm all for crowning more state champs, but
Right.
we'll just see how it plays out. I mean, it's still an exciting time of year. We're still going to have great
Absolutely.
teams and great games. So, I'm all for it.
Yep.
Yeah, let's run down some of the playoff matchups and again the brackets. We've talked about this a number of times. It just seems like there's quite a few regions that the Division 2 bracket is going to be the tougher bracket. Um,
Yeah.
I really think 6A Region 1, 5A Region 2, and even 4A Region 1. I think D2 is just going to be sort of a gauntlet, and whoever comes out of those, probably the favorite to win it all. But yeah, let's start with 6A. I mean, we have to start with the number one team in the country. We've seen them a couple of times. Byron Nelson Bobcats, still
Sure.
just one loss on the year. They finished out 4-6A, 16-0, undefeated champs. Um, their only loss coming to Highland Park way back in the first week of the season in Hawaii. But
Yeah,
yeah,
in your area, by the way. So I
area,
imagine Bree is not talking to you anymore, right?
Hawaii born. Uh, but yeah, we've seen a couple times. They're just so balanced, so good. Obviously led by their all state all star setter Sophie Peterson. They got
Hmm.
great hitters and Kylie Kleckner, AJC, Lexi Proctor has done a great job, and then now all of a sudden they bring back maybe their best player in Sydney Peterson, who's a
Right.
senior and committed to Rice. She was injured for all of the season. I think, maybe finished out the last 3 or 4 games back on the court. So that to add another weapon. But yeah, I mean, again, they're going to be D2. That's going to be the tougher of the bracket.
Yes.
But yeah, let's just talk about Byron Nelson and their chances to go back to Garland and win the state championship, which would be their second first since 2019.
Yeah, and I mean, what better way to start out the playoffs than hosting the first round, right? At your own place. Byron Nelson will be hosting Weatherford Tuesday at 6 o'clock. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of this is where Bree's got the team. And of course, she's a former All-American in college, former two-time Gatorade player of the year in high school back in the day for her mom. And I know Danielle, her sister, will be saying, yeah, but I've got more state rings. So, we don't want to go there, right? And of course, Keller is going to be one of those teams we're going to be talking about for the playoffs, too. So congrats to Danielle. And I mean, goodness, they've got Anna Flores, who's a great player, a setter, blocker, and hitter as well. So, I mean, just a ton of talent in that Barker family, just all around. And what's interesting, and we'll mention this later in one of the other classifications. Byron Nelson, of course, has been, as you said, number one in the country as well as the state. The number two team, Dripping Springs, of course, depending on who you're talking to, they might be number one as well. Dripping Springs is also in Division 2. So you've got that potential head-to-head matchup that a lot of folks have been talking about and wondering, and kind of and I'll lead this into you. What we realized in the regular season was there's one team in each district that becomes a linchpin And if they win, they get to the playoffs, then another team moves down to Division 2, down as far as like enrollment numbers go. And if they lose, then that team goes Division 1. And we talked about before, I know you've talked it ad nauseum, Eaton High School. They make the playoffs. That puts Byron Nelson at Division 2. Dripping Springs is in a district where they were going to be Division 2 no matter what, because you've got Westlake, Austin High, and Lake Travis in that district, and that's a powerful district, as is the one that Byron Nelson plays. So we could go throughout the state, and of course we won't do it because we don't have enough time to do that. But there was that linchpin in Eaton High School, who, by the way, is in Northwest ISD, the same school district as Byron Nelson, proved to be the linchpin. And so you've got that potential at state. You've got Byron Nelson and Dripping Spring, but each of those coaches will tell you we got a long way to go before we even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, at least for the first half of the district season and for the better part of the second half, you had someone like Keller Central who kind of was in the driver's seat for that fourth playoff spot. And if they had made it, then Byron Nelson would have been pushed up to D1.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, it's crazy to look at the bracket in D2. Again, you have district champ Byron Nelson, you have district champ Hebron out of District 5. You have
Mm-hmm.
Flower Mound, who finished runner up and played for a championship on the last day of the season. You have Plano West, who went 15-1 district champ. And that's crazy. I mean, and
Mm-hmm.
Plano West is playing Flower Mound in the first round. That's a
Right.
third round, fourth round matchup, and
Right.
to have those two match up in the first round is kind of unfair because I mean, those two schools are favorites, a good chance to make a deep playoff run, and one of them is going to go home. But you have that matchup. You have a potential matchup with Byron Nelson in the third round. But yeah, I think whoever comes
Yeah.
out of this region, uh, I mean, again, they'll have to face Dripping Springs, but you got to like their chances to at least win state. No.
Yeah, you do. And I'm glad you brought up Plano West and Flower Mound. First of all, congrats. Plano West ended up playing things out like you would predict at the beginning of the season. It was a little rough early on, and we kind of wondered about your thoughts, but they played that out well. But yeah, that's kind of another fallout, if you will, from Division 1, Division 2. Usually, you get the good teams, really good teams. You never say cakewalk because you have to play the matches, but sometimes there's opponents that you feel like aren't up to the level of the other teams, like a Plano West or Flower Mound. The fallout from the D1, D2, you're going to have matches like that. And we could go again, spend ad nauseum time, which we won't do. There's a ton of those that are usually third round, fourth round matchups in the state that you've got the first round matchup and you look at it, it's like, man, that's just not right. I mean, you look at Flower Mound and Jamie Siegel, what they've done, you look at Plano West and what they've done this year, it's like it's an injustice to both those teams, as you said. But you're going to have those happen. And then, as you said, Byron Nelson could see the winner of that match, down the road in the playoffs before they get to state. And, again, it kind of comes into also what you talked about with regionals. There's no regional tournament in 2A through 6A anymore. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And I think, too, kind of off track for a second, we talked to a lot of coaches between the two of us and Butch Hart, who I keep in touch with TGCA. A lot of them are wondering how this is going to play out too. They're interested to go through it to see how this plays out. And they feel like they'll be a little bit better ready next year because they'll have done it one time.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention Salt Lake Carroll also in that deep
Yes.
bracket. So yeah, it's just going to be
And
crazy.
by the way, Hebron, who beat out Flower Mound for the district championship, is also D2.
Right, and Hebron will play someone out of that Plano West district, which one of the toughest districts around. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Again, Plano West versus Flower Mound. You mentioned Byron Nelson versus Weatherford. Salt Lake is playing Boswell on Monday. Uh,
Right. At Boswell.
yeah, And then, District 7, you have JJ Pierce, who co-champs out of that district. They'll be D2.
Right.
Arlington Colts, they're D2. So yeah, this region is packed and loaded, and it's going to be exciting to watch, but at the same time, hard to choose which games to go to because there are going to be so
Oh
many.
yeah. And by the way, real quick, statewide, we talk about Dripping Springs. Also, Austin High out of Dripping's own district in 28 6A, and Tompkins out of the Houston area, and San Antonio Brandeis also in the mix in Division Two. So it is a powered pack Division Two and 6A this year.
Yeah, and then 6A D1, still a lot of great teams.
Oh yeah.
We'll start again. You mentioned Keller and Eaton out of District
Mhm.
4. Keller will get Mansfield Legacy, and Eaton will get Mansfield Lake Ridge out of District 3, who had a terrific year and co-champs. I believe their first outright championship in program history. So
Right.
congrats to them, Coach Amber Hughes. But they're playing lights out. But that Eaton district is tough, like you mentioned. So that's going to be a really great matchup. I've got to give a shout out to Louisville Farmers. They're in the D1 bracket. First playoff trip since 1997. So
I love that.
got to talk to their coach, Kara Sumter, a couple days ago. Yeah, just congrats to them. That's awesome. They have
They'll
20.
play Plato East at Hebron at 6:30 on Monday.
Yeah, Louisville's got 20 wins overall. I believe 7 in district. Those numbers haven't been matched since 2007. So great job
Right.
all around. But yeah, Louisville versus Plano East. You have Allen versus Coppell. Lake Highlands, who made a good run last year. They'll be in
Hmm.
one. Arlington Martin, who I did a story. Crazy. They've not lost a district game since 2018. They're riding a 92 game district win streak. They'll be D1. But yeah, what's kind of your take on the D1 bracket in 6A Region 1? It almost seems like Keller is the heavy favorite.
Yeah, you'd have to say that. Eaton, of course, will play on the road at Lake Ridge. That would be a really good matchup for both those teams. One team that has always slid under the radar and they have a lot of losses because they played so many good teams early on. They hosted their own tournament, the Battle of the Rock in week 1, Rockwall. That's kind of my wild card. They could either do really well or upset somebody down the line. Coach Ferguson always has that team battle ready, and that's going to be a fun team to watch as well. Duncanville back in the playoffs for the first time in a while since the late 90s when they were perennially state tournament favorites, to say the least. Good to see Richardson in there as well. Waxahachie, they had a 1 year kind of fallout as they transition coaches, but they're back. So it's going to be really, really interesting overall in Region 1. Now, the other thing is too, or the regions up here in DFW. The other thing too is we talked about how packed D2 is. This is not a bad matchup here at all. If you look across the state, Grand Oaks, the team that won 6-8 last year, they'll be, if things don't change and you keep the two state champs, they're going to be the last ever solo
Right.
6A champion. The Woodlands out of Houston has been playing really well lately. They had a strong finish. Klein Oak. And then kind of like the match we talked about with Plano West and Flower Mound, this is a really good matchup between two really good teams that would have been in 3 or 4 rounds. But Ridge Point and Dawson out of Houston, whoever wins that one has a chance to go far. And that's kind of a tough one too, to say, well, sorry, this is the first round matchup you get because of D1, D2. And then Westlake High School, which is out of the Dripping Springs Austin High School district, again, 28 6A, very strong as well. They've got a chance to make some noise as well in Division 1.
Yeah, I just want to real quick. You mentioned Rockwall, who's coming out of tournament season. Maybe more losses than they had hoped, but playing some of the best teams around, and then
Yep.
going on to win district. I believe the sixth straight year they've won district, and they're riding a 49 game district win streak. So uh, great job from them, Coach Ferguson. Um, they're in Region Two, but then you have Waxahachie, who district champ. They're Region Two. Both
Right.
teams are D1. Uh, last year it's funny because Rockwall played Saxe in round three, and because of the divisional split, they're playing them in round one.
Round one. Yep.
So not easy by any means, but nevertheless a great matchup. And then Wiley High is D1, they're district champs, so congrats to them. Wiley East shared a co-district championship. It's Wiley East's first ever in program history, and they'll be in D2. So yeah, I mean it's gonna be fun. I mean, obviously 6A, top of the class, great teams, great matchups, and like I said, we're excited for it.